Hi, I'm Susan Moore. I'm really happy to be here today. I want to thank the Portland Art Museum for hosting us. Um, and I'm going to be reading from my book, That Place Where You Opened Your Hands, and a few other poems. But I'm really psyched and happy to be in front of this painting by Camille Pissarro because there's a longer poem in my book, which I'm not going to read today because it is the longest poem in the book, but it's called Diary from the Red House, and it's actually based on this painting, The Red House, which is one of my favorites. So I'm just going to get started. So there's a lot of houses and animals in my book, so I'll start with another. I'm in front of the Red House. I'm going to start with a poem called Inside Our House is Another House. Inside our house is another house, where everything we say to each other flies around the walls and fireplace before coming quietly to rest on top of our heads. Above our roof is another roof, where birds organize the sky. Laying aside all our stored up hurts, we slip into bed and burrow to the center of the mattress, where someone has built a small theme park. If I shrink myself fast enough, I can ride the Ferris wheel before dark. If I leave a trail of popcorn, the tiny lions will escape from their cages. We string lights around the ceiling beams and lean out the bedroom window to see if the wind is strong enough for kites. With the right knife and string, I could build one from a broken chair and ferns. In some situations, you might find me amazing, or more than a little ordinary. What if I filled the bathtub with water and let it overflow until all the furniture floated? Then we could swim through the house and decide what to save. What would you think of me then? This next poem is called I Wanted to Lie Down with You Where the Roof Tops. It's very strange to be reading poetry in a mask, but it's also kind of exciting in a weird way. I wanted to lie down with you where the rooftops dissolved if we stared long enough. You said unless we were full of each other, we'd only be cardboard cutouts in a sky that continues whether or not we were there to witness, whether we were part of the landscape or only passing through. I had a good time today thinking about Jesus. Everyone gets murdered eventually, and only the lucky ones get to choose the weapon that will be their undoing. I wanted to flatten the mountains so they'd fit more neatly against the sky. You were outside, pushing your feelings into clouds. I'm doing pretty well with this incarnation, less settled, and the seasons come at me harder. I left all the lights on and then walked through the house and turned them off, stopping in each window to look for a face pressed against the glass. I wanted to die standing up, looking toward the horizon at something moving toward me, a ship or a really big animal. You said unless we rubbed our bodies together, we wouldn't understand beauty. I wanted to hold my skull in my hands, to know how the bones fit together in the place I could press on hard to make it shatter. This poem is called Bats. I'm fascinated by bats, but this poem actually starts with a lie. So, bats. I like the way bats fly toward my hair at dusk, like I might be that tree they've been searching for. I'm territory. I had a dream where someone called Mom, Mom, and I sat up in bed and said, what? I'm marked. Today I boasted how well I could wield a kitchen knife, and you knew I was lying as soon as I opened the drawer, the one with all the knives. I wonder how it feels to have wings instead of arms, to exist in two frequencies. Some bats can't feel the sky without another bat telling them where it is, but some learn to navigate the space between buildings alone. I'm tired of not knowing what comes next, which is a bad way to live. After the afterlife, what then? I'm prepared to come back as a mouse or a mule deer, but don't think I'll be content with just dirt. I loved sideways, like a train that swerves right before it collides with another train. I lived like a Ferris wheel. I like to think of the river as a series of raincoats flung off by people long before us. I like to think of you sleeping next to me like you've always been there. I had a feeling you would show up today as something I never get tired of saying, like feelings could get us anywhere. If I opened the door onto the balcony, if I knocked down the wall between my apartment and my neighbors, would I be able to walk through? If I could see by the sound my singing made when it bounced into people or trees, would that make me a better person? What would I do with all that awareness? If the river were a swimming pool, how far could I swim before I had to come up for air? Okay. What am I doing? This poem is called The Fuchsia, the Orange, and the Dahlias. We were waiting what seemed like a long time. When someone said they thought the sign pointing left had been deliberately forged and the route to the city had become untenable. The conversation kept returning to science, to fields of cows and numbers. Meanwhile, the days paraded their soft perfume. A neighbor pulled a tapestry from the shelf, and we noticed how bright the colors were, how the orange and fuchsia in the bird's wings made it seem not mythical, but fleeting, and how the dahlias woven into the garden held a message of purpose, or the signs of a leisure we couldn't possess. It was all we could do not to comment on it for hours. Some of us felt strange in the heat, as though we could taste the sun in our hair or fold it in our hands like papers. The past was to be shunned. If it knocked, we agreed not to answer. Such form of resolve kept us incorrigible for days. Okay, and this one's called Sight Comes to Owls Slowly, which might be true. Sight comes to owls slowly. They leave their nests and their foreheads ache. They think the day wants to hurt them. So when I wore my owl suit, the atoms of owls shifted inside me. I climbed into the sky, and they believed me possible owl. I flapped my wings like night and hidden, but I was not so sure an owl. First I wore the body, and then I wore the head, and when I asked for trees, they gave me trees, but not how I wanted. Not like limbs to practice dives from sky to bigger sky, but trees that bent their branches to land me safely in the sky. Daughter on the ground, but in the sky I rested. When the night was tall, my wings, where trees became more wings and then a sky to sleep in. A nest and what I found inside, cracked shells and molting, and what I saw was shadows. My sister owls were far above me, the ground a long way down, and nothing in the trees that heard me. Okay, and I'm going to read a couple newer poems. This one's called As the Sparks Fly Upward. It features Jiminy Cricket, if any of you remember him. He's the little cricket from Pinocchio. And if you know the song When You Wish Upon a Star, it's featured in here. Okay, so this is called As the Sparks Fly Upward. My favorite part of the universe is the atmosphere beyond the Milky Way, where stars that have yet to be named drift towards each other on a collision course that won't end in my lifetime. Does anything inhabit them, or is it only dust and Swiss cheese? When I was a kid, my favorite record was Jiminy Cricket singing When You Wish Upon a Star on a 45 I played over and over on my portable record player. If your heart is in your dreams, no request is too extreme. But what if your heart is in your darkest self? You might turn into a donkey. Some people still believe the earth is flat and pictures the astronauts sent from space are forged. Maybe they think if a surgeon cut them open, they wouldn't find organs, just a miniature train set, carrying their blood from place to place. The scientist who first saw cells under a microscope didn't name them after prison, but the rooms that monks inhabit in between vespers. He was studying a piece of cork. Sometimes seeing feels like praying, especially when no one understands when you tell them it's not just cork, it's all of us. our bodies assembled like honeycombs. My favorite part of coming home is the man standing in my kitchen who I would never describe as not having a care in the world, but who somehow makes me feel careless, like I could throw a kitten off the roof and he'd catch it. There is mystery in everything is another way of saying no one is sure why we have clouds. Some people like the sky best when it's empty and waiting for us to introduce ourselves. Hello, stranger, what took you so long? And just to clarify, I would never throw a kitten off the roof. So this one is one that has actually written since we all entered this weird time since March. So it's called A Miniature Park Bench Under a Giant Tree. A miniature park bench under a giant tree is how I feel about myself in relation to existence. Sometimes it feels like the seasons have stopped and we remain in one continual present. It's hard to get quiet enough to know what I really want. This morning I looked at the neighbor's yard and thought, after the peonies, the daffodils will bloom. I'm losing my sense of the order of things. I'm a ladybug hunting for aphids in a parking lot. Slipping into remembering is dangerous if you return with no insights. My favorite photos of people I used to know are ones where they look straight into the camera. There are many kinds of bookmarks, but nothing like a folded page. Okay, the last poem I will read is called Night of the Living. It's also got stars and constellations in it. This is where I say, wow, you've been a great audience, but you have been. This is called Night of the Living. If the constellation of stars above your house looked like a woman skating across a lake, you could name it that. If someone long before you called it warrior with a sword or dragon at the gate, it doesn't matter. It's your sky now. If you're lost in the evening fog, all your former selves line up by the side of the road to show you the way home. If you want to pry open the moon and crawl inside, remember the sky waits like a clock for you to unwind. The planets contain the fur of woolly mammoths and fossilized ferns that never got to be trees. Your position relative to them is what you think about when night is a rabbit hole and sleep is a coin toss. A hand moves across your face in a dream you are having about being alive. When you wake up, the hand disappears along with the way it felt to be dreaming, on the edge of some great adventure. The shadows of owls against the trees are not owls, but you can pretend the sound of branches against the window is someone trying to get in. You can breathe and imagine the night breathes with you. Thank you.